What would you do if the person you trusted most turned out to be hiding a horrifying secret? He was a pillar of the community, a renowned surgeon who saved countless lives. But the truth lurking within his own home was a nightmare he could never have imagined. This isn't just a story of crime. It's a harrowing tale of deceit, betrayal, and a father's desperate attempt to unravel the darkness within his own family. Brace yourself as we uncover exclusive interviews, chilling reenactments, and shocking revelations that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. As we reflect on this real-life story, subscribe and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button, and let us hear from you in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Now let's continue. Dr. James Elliott was a name everyone knew in the quiet, suburban town of Maplewood. A highly respected surgeon, he had built a reputation over the years for his skill, dedication, and compassionate nature. For nearly 2 decades, Dr. Elliott had been a fixture in the community, his name synonymous with life-saving surgeries, his gentle demeanor bringing comfort to patients and their families. His clinic, located just a few blocks from his home, was a beacon of trust in the town. He was known for going above and beyond, working late hours, and always prioritizing his patients' well-being over his own. But it wasn't just his professional life that garnered admiration. Dr. Elliott had what appeared to be the perfect family. His wife, Grace, was a picture of warmth and kindness, a devoted mother and a supportive partner. Together, they had 2 children, 6-year-old Emma, a quiet and bright teenager, and 3-year-old Lucas, an active and charming boy who had a way of lighting up any room he walked into. From the outside, the Elliots seemed to have it all. They were the envy of their neighbors, the epitome of the American dream. They attended community events, hosted dinner parties, and volunteered for local causes, always presenting a united front. Yet, despite the appearances of a flawless family, something far darker was simmering just beneath the surface. Dr. Elliott, a man who had dedicated his life to saving others, found himself unable to save the one thing that mattered most to his own family. And in the shadows of his pristine life, a secret was quietly festering, one that would soon come to light in the most horrific way imaginable. I do hope you have subscribed already, as it is about to get really interesting. Grace, who had always been his rock, had begun to withdraw. She'd become distant, her once warm smile replaced with a tired, vacant expression. Emma, who had once excelled in school and was known for her spirited personality, had started to show signs of rebellion. Lucas, the sweet boy who'd always been the joy of their lives, seemed quieter than usual, retreating into himself. It was clear to those closest to the family that something wasn't right, but no one could quite put their finger on what it was. The perfect family was slowly unraveling, and Dr. Elliott, consumed by his demanding career, had no idea that the very foundation of his world was about to collapse. For Dr. Elliott, there was no greater joy than his patients. He was the first to arrive at the hospital in the morning and the last to leave at night. His colleagues admired his unwavering dedication to his work. He'd often stay after hours to check in on recovering patients, making sure they were comfortable and had everything they needed. His colleagues would joke about how he never took a day off, but for him, there was no other place he'd rather be than in the operating room or by the side of a patient in need. But as his career soared, his attention to his own family began to slip. At first, it was small things, a missed family dinner here, a forgotten school recital there. But as the months went on, his absences became more pronounced. Grace, who had always been understanding, began to show signs of frustration. Emma and Lucas felt the strain too, each silently coping with the increasing absence of their father. Yet, Dr. Elliott remained oblivious, convinced that the demands of his work were justified, that saving lives came before everything else. What no one could have predicted was that this obsession with his work would ultimately lead to his undoing. Behind the closed doors of their seemingly perfect home, cracks began to form, and the dark secrets of the Elliott family slowly began to rise to the surface. It started with small, unsettling incidents, shifting behavior from Emma, strange notes that Lucas would leave around the house, Grace becoming more reclusive. But it wasn't until one evening in late November, when the unthinkable occurred, that Dr. Elliot would finally be forced to face the horrific truth. No one knew at the time, but what appeared to be an ordinary family night would set off a chain of events that would shake Maplewood to its core. Dr. Elliot's world was about to collide with a truth darker than anything he had ever faced in the operating room. As we dig deeper into the unsettling events that unfolded, you'll hear from those who knew the Elliots best, and from the people who uncovered the chilling truth that lay hidden behind their perfect exterior. Exclusive interviews and startling reenactments will reveal the depth of the betrayal and the terrifying secret that had been building in the shadows of the Elliot household. Prepare for a story that will leave you questioning the very nature of trust, family, and the darkness that can lie just beneath the surface of even the most seemingly perfect lives. It was a typical evening at the Elliot household. The crisp winter air had settled over Maplewood, and the family gathered around the dining room table, sharing a quiet meal. The warmth of the hearth and the soft murmur of conversation created an illusion of normalcy, masking the tension that had been building in the home for weeks. Dr. Elliot, still exhausted from a long day of surgeries, tried to focus on his family, but the nagging feeling that something wasn't right lingered in the back of his mind. Grace, Emma, and Lucas sat in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts. That night, something would happen that would shatter the facade of their perfect family forever. After dinner, Dr. Elliot retired to his study, a cozy room lined with bookshelves and framed awards. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could unwind from the pressures of his medical career. As he sat at his desk, reviewing patient charts, he noticed something unusual. One of the books on the shelf was slightly askew, as though it had been moved. Curiosity piqued. He reached for the book and pulled it free from the shelf. To his shock, a hidden compartment slid open behind it. Inside, a small, weathered box lay tucked away, its surface marked by years of neglect. Dr. Elliot's heart raced as he carefully lifted the box, feeling the weight of its mystery. It wasn't an item he recognized, and yet it seemed out of place in the otherwise pristine home. As he opened the box, a chill swept over him. There, nestled inside, was an old, delicate note, folded and yellowed with age. The note was cryptic, written in a horrid, scrawling hand. The truth lies hidden where no one dares to look. You must face it before it's too late. The word sent a shiver down Dr. Elliot's spine. Was this some sort of warning, or a sign of something much darker? But the unease didn't stop there. As he placed the note back in the box, Dr. Elliot's gaze shifted to the corner of his desk. Something was missing. A prized family heirloom, a silver pocket watch, passed down through generations of Elliots, was gone. It had always been in the same spot, a constant reminder of his family's history. Panic began to rise in his chest. The heirloom had disappeared, and the only clue left behind was a mysterious note. Dr. Elliot's mind raced. Could this be connected to the strange behavior he had noticed in his family recently? The tension, the secretive glances, the unsettling silence that seemed to hang in the air? The seemingly perfect life he had built with Grace, Emma, and Lucas was now cracking wide open. What was happening in his home? He called Grace into the study, his voice shaky with concern. She entered, her face pale as she saw the open compartment and the missing watch. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Dr. Elliot replied, trying to mask the panic in his voice. "But something's wrong, Grace. I feel it. I've been noticing things, small things. But this is different." Grace's face twisted in confusion and worry. "What do you mean?" "Maybe it's just a mistake. The watch could have fallen somewhere or—" "No," he interrupted, his voice firm with an edge of desperation. "It's not a mistake. Something's happening. I don't know what, but we need to figure this out." The next few days passed in a blur of suspicion and unease. Dr. Elliot's every instinct told him that something was terribly amiss, but his search for answers led him into increasingly dark territory. He found no trace of the missing watch. The cryptic note only deepened the mystery, and yet no one could offer any explanation. His first call was to the police. The investigation was slow to start, as there were no obvious suspects. The Elliott family had no history of trouble, and their neighbors spoke highly of them. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Laura Hayes, found nothing in the initial search that suggested foul play. There were no signs of forced entry into the home, and the rest of the house appeared untouched. As the days turned into weeks, the sense of unease only grew. Dr. Elliott could no longer ignore the mounting questions. Why had the note been hidden, and why was the heirloom taken? What was this hidden secret that seemed to be threatening to consume his family? Even with the police investigation underway, Dr. Elliott felt increasingly isolated. The more he learned, the more he realized that the truth was far more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. A dark, twisted path was unfolding before him, and it led straight to the heart of his own home. The strange behavior of his family members grew more pronounced. Grace, once so understanding and loving, became distant, almost cold at times. Emma, the bright and promising teenager, started to exhibit signs of rebellion, her once gentle nature replaced by a bitterness that seemed to grow with each passing day. Lucas, the boy who had always been full of life, retreated further into himself, his once bright eyes now shadowed with fear. The crime, if it could even be called that, remained elusive, its true nature just out of reach. But Dr. Elliott's world was spiraling, and the more he uncovered, the deeper he was drawn into a web of deceit that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The note, the missing heirloom, the shifting behavior of his family, it was all part of something far greater and far more sinister than he could have imagined. Detective Laura Hayes had seen her fair share of complex cases, but the Elliott family case was unlike anything she had ever encountered. A seasoned investigator with over 5 years on the force, Hayes was no stranger to the undercurrents of deception that often ran beneath seemingly perfect exteriors. Still, this case left her with an unsettling feeling. There was something about it, the missing heirloom, the cryptic note, the strange behavior of the family, that seemed too orchestrated, too planned. Hayes, with her sharp instincts and methodical approach, began her investigation by first interviewing the Elliots. She noted their uneasy demeanor, their fractured responses, and the subtle tension in the air whenever Dr. Elliott mentioned the missing heirloom. She was careful, calm, and precise in her questioning, but nothing seemed to fit into a coherent narrative. The family insisted that nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, and yet everything about their story felt incomplete. In the initial phases of the investigation, Detective Hayes began reviewing Dr. Elliott's personal and professional life. She interviewed colleagues, patients, and neighbors, but no one seemed to have any answers. The doctor's reputation was impeccable, and there were no signs of any personal or financial troubles. But Hayes knew that people always kept secrets, and it was her job to uncover them. It wasn't until one evening, while sifting through Dr. Elliott's personal computer, that the first major clue emerged. While reviewing the family's financial records and browsing through Dr. Elliott's private emails, Hayes discovered a hidden online account linked to the doctor's name, an account he had never disclosed to anyone. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard online banking account. But when Hayes dug deeper, she found something far more sinister. The account contained hundreds of encrypted files, many of which were password protected. But one file, in particular, caught her attention. It was titled The Secret, a document filled with disturbing content. As she carefully examined it, she was shocked by what she read. Diagrams, names, and photographs, all pointing to a network of individuals connected to Dr. Elliott's past, many of whom had dark and twisted histories. But it wasn't just the names that made her blood run cold. It was the chilling descriptions of family members, including the children, suggesting they had been involved in a deeper, more sinister plan than anyone could have imagined. The file hinted at a series of transactions and hidden meetings, information that, when pieced together, painted a very different picture of the Elliott family than what had been presented to the world. Hayes dug further, tracing the digital footprint of the account. It led her to a string of anonymous phone calls and threatening messages sent to Dr. Elliot over the past several months. The calls, initially dismissed as pranks, became more frequent and increasingly menacing. The messages were cryptic at first, but as they escalated, they hinted at something far more threatening. "You can't hide forever. The truth will come out." The final message sent before the disappearance of the heirloom was the most disturbing. "You have something we want, and we'll do whatever it takes to get it." What was even more perplexing was that the calls didn't come from an unknown number. Instead, they were routed through a series of burner phones, all linked to untraceable locations. The lack of concrete suspects was maddening, but Hayes was certain that these calls were connected to the missing heirloom. Whoever was behind this had planned everything meticulously. The breakthrough came when Hayes was able to link the missing heirloom to a group of individuals with ties to Dr. Elliot's past. She discovered a hidden network of people involved in a series of shady transactions, many of whom had been connected to the surgeon's early years of medical school. Some were former colleagues, others were patients, but all had a history that painted a far darker picture than Dr. Elliot's squeaky clean reputation suggested. Please, my beloved family, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you as you do so. One of these individuals, a former classmate named Richard Mallory, was a known criminal with a history of illegal dealings. Mallory had been part of a high-profile medical malpractice case years ago that had nearly ruined Dr. Elliot's career. While Mallory had since disappeared from the public eye, Hayes was able to track him to a remote location, where she found a stash of blackmail material, photographs, videos, and documents all implicating Mallory's involvement with Dr. Elliot's family. The deeper Hayes dug, the more she realized that the Elliots were not just victims of a crime. They were players in something much larger, something that stretched back years. As the investigation advanced, Dr. Elliot became increasingly unsettled by what Hayes was uncovering. The cryptic note, the missing heirloom, the disturbing content found online. It all pointed to one conclusion. His family had been hiding something from him. The tension in the Elliot household had reached a boiling point, and the walls of his perfect world were crumbling. Emma, once the shy and obedient daughter, had grown more defiant. She would often disappear for hours without explanation, and her behavior became erratic. Lucas, too, seemed withdrawn, avoiding his father's gaze whenever he asked about the missing heirloom. Dr. Elliot began to question whether his own children were involved in this dark, twisted game. Had they known something? Were they complicit in the theft? Grace, too, became a suspect. Her once supportive nature had turned cold, and she was no longer the woman Dr. Elliot had fallen in love with. Her secretive behavior and sudden disappearances raised red flags. Could it be that his family, the very people he had devoted his life to, were hiding a terrifying truth? Could they have been playing him from the beginning? As the investigation continued, Hayes grew more convinced that the missing heirloom was not just a valuable object. It was a key to a much larger mystery, one that could change the Elliot family forever. The darkness surrounding them was closing in, and the truth, as terrifying as it was just beginning to surface. As the investigation progressed, Detective Hayes knew that time was running out. The increasing tension within the Elliot household had reached its peak, and Dr. Elliot was growing more desperate for answers. One afternoon, while conducting a routine search of the Elliot home, Hayes made a discovery that would shake the foundation of the entire case. In the basement, hidden behind a false wall, was a door that led to an abandoned, dimly lit room. It was small, no larger than a closet, but the sight of it sent a shiver down Hayes' spine. The room, untouched by time, was filled with dusty old furniture, strange artifacts, and, most unsettling of all, a series of photographs pinned to the walls. The images depicted the Elliot family, Dr. Elliot, Grace, Emma, and Lucas, in various settings over the years. But there was something off about the photos. They were not the happy, loving family shots Dr. Elliot had cherished. Instead, they were dark, grainy, and staged, almost as though someone had been following the family for years, documenting their every move. In the corner of the room, a large wooden chest sat covered in dust. When Hayes opened it, the contents confirmed her worst fears. Inside were a series of journals, written in an unfamiliar hand, detailing every aspect of the Elliot family's life, an unsettling account of their history, their secrets, and, most disturbingly, their involvement in a much larger, shadowy world. The journals revealed that the Elliot family had been under surveillance for years, their every step tracked by a group with far-reaching influence. Whoever was behind the mysterious note, the missing heirloom, and the cryptic online accounts had been manipulating Dr. Elliot and his family from the shadows for much longer than anyone had realized. The chilling realization began to set in. Dr. Elliot and his family were not just victims in a crime. They had been players in a much larger game, one they never fully understood. As Detective Hayes pondered the implications of her discovery, a breakthrough came when a key witness came forward. For weeks, no one had been able to uncover the identity of the mysterious individuals connected to the missing heirloom, but then, a former colleague of Dr. Elliot's, someone who had worked with him during his early years in the medical field, reached out with critical information. This former colleague, Dr. Richard Malloy, the same individual Hayes had previously traced in connection with the missing heirloom, had been working as an undercover informant for a group involved in medical corruption. Malloy had been keeping tabs on Dr. Elliot for years, not just as a former classmate, but as part of a larger scheme involving illegal organ trade. The heirloom wasn't just a family artifact. It was part of a long-standing arrangement with a shadowy network of criminal organizations. The heirloom was the key to unlocking a trove of stolen medical data, and Dr. Elliot, unwittingly, had been used as a pawn in this larger operation. The former colleague, now terrified for his own life, revealed that the Elliot family had been unknowingly involved in a series of black market surgeries that had led to the disappearance of several individuals over the years. Dr. Elliot had no knowledge of this network, nor of the crimes being committed in his name, but the evidence was undeniable. Hayes was stunned. This wasn't just about a missing watch. It was about a twisted, criminal conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight. But the most shocking twist was yet to come. Dr. Elliot, upon hearing the revelations from Detective Hayes, decided to confront his children. He could no longer ignore the mounting suspicion that they were somehow involved in the crime. His mind raced with questions. Had they known about the criminal network? Had they been part of the plot to steal the heirloom? Were they complicit in their family's descent into darkness? The confrontation took place in the family's living room, where Dr. Elliot, with a growing sense of dread, confronted Emma and Lucas about their recent behavior. Emma, for the first time, seemed to break down. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed that she had discovered the truth about their family's involvement in the illegal operations. It had started innocently enough, with a few unexplained events, a missing item here, a cryptic message there. But over time, Emma had pieced together the horrifying reality her father, the man she had admired and trusted, had unknowingly become entangled in a web of corruption, manipulation, and crime. But the true revelation came when Lucas, the seemingly sweet and innocent child, spoke up. His voice trembled as he shared a dark secret he had known about the criminal activities for years, long before Emma had figured it out. The truth was too terrifying for him to bear, and he had kept silent, terrified of what it might mean for their family. Lucas explained that he had been blackmailed into keeping the secret, and that he had been threatened by people who had deep connections to his father's past. He revealed that the missing heirloom, the note, and the strange online account were all part of a plan to force Dr. Elliot to participate in the illegal operations. The heirloom, it seemed, held the key to exposing the entire network, and whoever was behind it would stop at nothing to get it. The room fell into a stunned silence as Dr. Elliot absorbed the weight of his children's confessions. His perfect world had crumbled, and the shocking truth was finally out. The Elliots were no longer a family united by love and trust. They were pawns in a deadly game, their lives manipulated by forces far beyond their control. Dr. Elliot was left with a painful choice. expose the truth and risk destroying his family, or remain silent and protect the very people who had betrayed him. The twists and turns had left him shattered, his sense of reality forever altered. The case that had started with a missing heirloom had become a labyrinth of deceit, betrayal, and a father's broken trust in the very people he had sworn to protect. The truth about Dr. Elliot's children shocked the world, and its ripple effect spread through the small suburban town where they had once been seen as the ideal family. Emma and Lucas were revealed to have been involved in the criminal network for years, albeit in different capacities. Emma, while initially unaware of the full extent of the operation, had unwittingly become part of the scheme after being manipulated into accepting certain favors from the wrong people. She had been led to believe that these favors were harmless, simple interactions involving wealth and power, until the reality of the situation hit her with full force. Lucas, on the other hand, had been more deeply entrenched in the criminal activities from the start. After being coerced into keeping the family secret, he had become a willing accomplice, caught in a spiral of threats, intimidation, and fear. The depth of his involvement was staggering. He had been one of the key players in the operation, unknowingly pushing his father further into the heart of the illicit network. The heirloom was not merely a family treasure. It had been a vital part of a series of blackmail tactics aimed at keeping Dr. Elliot compliant, unknowingly participating in the medical crimes orchestrated by the shadowy group. As the shocking revelations came to light, the community was left in disbelief. A once prominent surgeon, beloved by his patients and peers, had been living a lie, unaware of the darkness surrounding his family. The emotional toll on Dr. Elliot was immense. His children had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and the weight of this betrayal crushed him. But even more devastating was the realization that his own actions, though unintentional, had contributed to the horrifying web of deceit and crime. The legal proceedings began soon after the truth about Emma and Lucas came to light. The trial was an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. Dr. Elliot, once a figure of trust and admiration, now stood before a courtroom as a victim, betrayed by his own flesh and blood. In his testimony, his voice trembled with disbelief and anguish as he recounted the horror of uncovering his children's involvement in the criminal network. He described the intense internal conflict he faced, torn between his duty as a father and the shocking reality that his children had been complicit in something far darker than he could have imagined. In a powerful moment, Dr. Elliot spoke of his love for his children, his unwavering desire to protect them despite their betrayals. He recounted the many sleepless nights spent wondering how everything had gone so terribly wrong. His words left the courtroom in stunned silence. How could a man who had saved so many lives fall victim to such a monstrous betrayal by those he trusted the most? Emma, on the other hand, broke down in court, offering a tearful apology to her father. She explained that she had never intended to become involved in such a dangerous world, and that she had been manipulated and coerced into making decisions she deeply regretted. She expressed her shame, but also a desire for redemption. Lucas, too, faced a courtroom, his once innocent face now hardened by guilt and fear. He acknowledged his actions, but his remorse seemed overshadowed by the pressure he had been under to protect his family. The prosecution painted a grim picture of the Elliot children, presenting evidence of their direct involvement in the criminal activities that had plagued their family. Their emotional testimony only served to complicate the case further. How could a father, who had been a model citizen, come to terms with the fact that his children had been part of such a horrific enterprise? And could he ever forgive them for the damage they had done to their family and his career? After weeks of intense legal proceedings, the jury delivered its verdict. Emma and Lucas were both convicted for their roles in the criminal network, although the severity of their sentences was debated. Emma, the seemingly more innocent of the two, was given a lesser sentence, as it was clear she had been manipulated into her involvement. Her sentencing reflected a belief that she could be rehabilitated and given a chance to rebuild her life. Lucas, however, faced a harsher punishment, given the extent of his involvement in the cold calculation with which he had participated in the crimes. The judge sentenced him to a lengthy prison term, with little chance for early release. For Dr. Elliot, The verdict was bittersweet. He was relieved that his children would face justice for their actions, but the pain of their betrayal lingered. The man who had once been a celebrated surgeon was now left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, his family forever altered. The emotional toll was profound, and while he had never been one to shy away from difficult situations, this was something that would haunt him for the rest of his days. In the aftermath of the case, Dr. Elliot found himself a broken man. The emotional and psychological toll of the trial weighed heavily on him. His reputation had been forever tarnished, and his relationship with his children, though strained, was now fundamentally changed. His dedication to his work, once the source of his pride, now felt hollow. How could he continue saving lives when his own family had been the source of his greatest betrayal? Despite the pain, Dr. Elliot tried to rebuild his life. He took time away from the medical field, seeking therapy and attempting to heal from the trauma of the case. He visited his children in prison, unsure of what to say, but determined to offer them some semblance of support. In the quiet moments, he wondered if they would ever be able to forgive themselves, and if, in time, he could ever find it within himself to forgive them. The case of Dr. Elliot and his family left an indelible mark on the community. People whispered about the tragedy for years to come, but for Dr. Elliot, the true battle had only just begun. The wounds of betrayal ran deep, and the road to healing would be a long and uncertain one. But through it all, one thing remained clear. The darkness that had consumed his family would never fully fade, no matter how hard he tried to move on. The truth behind Dr. Elliot's tragic family story is undeniably complex, and now we want to hear from you. What do you think motivated Emma and Lucas to become involved in such a dangerous and secretive criminal network? Was it fear, coercion, or something darker? Share your theories and thoughts in the comments below. Let's dive into this chilling case together. If you were as shocked by this story as we were, don't forget to give this video a like. Your support helps us bring more compelling, real-life investigations to light. And if you want to stay updated with the most gripping true crime stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Looking for more tales of disturbing family secrets and twisted betrayals? Check out our next video on family tragedies. It's another shocking story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the people around you. Trust us, you won't want to miss it.